In today's video, we will be talking about the latest Jamaica travel updates for September and onwards concerning both residents and non-residents and based on guidelines from the Ministry of Health and the Jamaica Tourist Board. If this is your first time, welcome to Trending Travel, and if you're not new here, welcome back. We will be making things much clearer for you and provide you with accurate, up-to-date and easy to understand information. To know your travel requirements, you must first know what category of traveler you are based on the 4 Jamaica traveler categories. We will be discussing all you need to know before arrival, on arrival, the rules, restrictions, and more important Jamaica travel considerations. Hopefully from this video, you will know exactly what to expect, clearly understand what to do, and make better travel plans about traveling to Jamaica. So, we encourage you to watch the entire video. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel for the latest Jamaica travel updates, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so that you will know when new updates are available. We have lots of fun, giveaways, and important travel information coming your way. Now, let's jump right in. Like most countries, the Jamaican authorities have established a controlled re-entry process. This process includes registration and approval for all travelers to Jamaica. Since reopening its borders to all travelers on June 15, 2020, there has been several changes to the travel rules and restrictions. Now, let us take a look at the Jamaica entry process that is in effect right now. As previously mentioned, the Jamaican authorities have placed travelers to Jamaica into 4 categories. One of these categories is for Jamaican residents, while the other 3 categories are for non-residents. While there are some differences in requirements for each category, please note that regardless of categories, all travelers must complete and submit a travel authorization and should expect to do a health screening and risk assessment at the airport. The health screening will include temperature checks, observation of symptoms, as well as a short interview with a health officer. While the risk assessment will help to determine the applicable testing and quarantine measures for each traveler. Amidst all this, there will be a sensitization session which will advise travelers of the various COVID-19 protocols within Jamaica, such as the usual washing and sanitizing of hands, wearing face masks in public, social distancing, gathering restrictions, and curfew hours. Please note that based on the assessment, some travelers will not require COVID testing, while other travelers will be tested at the airport, and some travelers may be required to make an appointment to do COVID testing at one of the government testing labs. And now, let's break this down even further. Let's look at the different requirements for each category of travelers. Category number 1, residents. This category is for travelers who live in Jamaica. They are basically Jamaican nationals and non-nationals who are living in Jamaica because of a work permit, marriage, being a dependent or child of a Jamaican national, and so on. So, what are the travel protocols for residents before arrival? Please note that travelers who are Jamaican residents are not required to do a COVID-19 pretest prior to arrival in Jamaica. Number 1. Apply for and submit the travel authorization. The Jamaican health authorities require that the travel authorization be applied for a maximum of 5 days and no less than 2 clear days before arrival in Jamaica. Now, let's discuss how to apply for the travel authorization. To apply, you will need to follow these 10 easy steps. Step 1. Have your passport, flight details, and baggage information ready. Step 2. Log on to jamcovid19.moh.gov.jm and click on Immigration. Do you live in Jamaica? Click Yes. Step 3. Enter your email address. A one-time password will be sent to your email to authenticate your account. Step 4. Fill in your personal information as requested, such as name, date of birth, passport number, location, and so on. Step 5. Answer the health questions. Step 6. Provide the home quarantine assessment information. Step 7. Provide consents to a series of declarations. Step 8. Provide your flight details and baggage information. Note that this can also be provided later. Step 9. Submit your application. And Step 10. Wait for your application to be reviewed. During the review process, you may be requested to provide any additional details or missing information for the consideration of your application. You may be asking, how long does it take to obtain the travel authorization? A response will be generated within 10 minutes of receipt of the submission, except for persons traveling from high-risk areas. For persons traveling from high-risk areas, the application for a travel authorization will be manually processed and will usually take up to 2 days for approval to be granted. And how long is a travel authorization valid? The travel authorization is valid for 7 days, except for travelers from high-risk areas. For persons traveling from high-risk areas, the travel authorization is valid for 11 days. Here's an important note. You should keep a printed or electronic copy of your travel authorization with you, along with your ticket and passport, in order to check in and board your flight. Please note that you will not be able to board your flight without your travel authorization. So, before arrival, applying for the travel authorization is number 1. Now, for number 2. Before you board your flight, you are encouraged to fill out the Immigration and Customs Declaration online at enterjamaica.com. And number 3. Download the JamCovid-19 app before leaving for Jamaica. The JamCovid-19 app can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or App World onto your mobile phone. The app is used to monitor and trace any spread of the virus and for tracking the movement of returning residents. Also, note that the entire process from application to approval and to completing the Immigration and Customs Declaration form can be managed online through the app. Installing it before you travel will help you to avoid unnecessary delays at the airport. Now, here are the protocols for Jamaican residents on arrival. Expect to do a health screening and risk assessment as previously mentioned. And of course, here's the million-dollar question. Will you need a COVID test? Well, it depends. If you're assessed as a low-risk traveler, the answer is no. You would not need a COVID test. However, travelers who are Jamaican residents may be required to do a COVID PCR test if assessed as high risk as a result of exhibiting symptoms, exposure to persons who have tested positive, belonging to a high-risk group, or other risk factors. High-risk groups include cruise ship workers, involuntarily returned migrants, and healthcare workers. Consider this: if persons are required to be tested and their test is negative, they will be required to complete their quarantine at home for 14 days from their date of entry to Jamaica. However, if the test is positive, they will be isolated either at home or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. Here's another important question. Will you be quarantined if you were assessed as a low-risk traveler? The answer is yes. All Jamaican residents will be quarantined whether or not they are assessed as low-risk or high-risk or required to be tested. Therefore, you will be required to remain in quarantine at home for 14 days from your date of entry to Jamaica. Next, what are the general quarantine rules for residents? Persons will be required to stay at home for 14 days from their date of entry to Jamaica. During this time, your movements and interaction with others will be limited. Persons will be allowed to leave their home only once per day to go to the nearest suitable location for the purpose of obtaining food, medical supplies, or medical services, conducting financial transactions, overseeing their place of business, attending a place of worship, and physical exercise. Persons would be required to work from home if applicable. And now, category number 2, non-resident tourism visitors staying in the resilient corridor. This category refers to non-residents who are visiting Jamaica for tourism purposes and staying at an approved resilient corridor accommodation. This brings us to address a very important question. What is the resilient corridor? The resilient corridor is simply the designated COVID-safe zone along Jamaica's coastline that has been approved by the Jamaican government for tourism purposes. Within the corridors, there are several approved accommodations and attractions that are COVID compliant according to government standards and can accept tourist visitors. Currently, the resilient corridors are made up of 2 zones. There is a northern zone which stretches from Negril in Westmoreland to Port Antonio in Portland. And there is the South Coast zone which stretches from Milk River in Clarendon to Negril in Westmoreland. Note that you will find a list of approved accommodations in the description. Before arrival, you should do the following. Number 1. Obtain a negative COVID-19 pretest if applicable. All travelers, business travelers included, 12 years of age and older, who are traveling from the United States, and note, all US states are now included, Brazil, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico, will be required to obtain and upload a negative COVID-19 PCR test when applying for the travel authorization at visitjamaica.com. Here are some rules to follow when obtaining the COVID-19 pretest. For travelers from the United States, Brazil, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico, the PCR test should be performed at a medical lab that is accredited by the relevant health authorities. For travelers from the United States, the lab should be accredited by the College of American Pathologists, CAP. The test should be conducted within 10 days of the intended travel date. The uploaded test results should include the name and date of birth of the individual tested, name of the lab, test type specified as RT-PCR, and the test result should of course be negative. Please note that after uploading the PCR test results at visitjamaica.com, you will also be required to present the original document upon arrival in Jamaica. Now, if you're not traveling from a designated high-risk area, you will not be required to upload a COVID-19 PCR test, but you should expect to be screened and assessed at the airport. Now, on to number 2. Apply for and submit the travel authorization. Here are 9 easy steps that you should follow. Step 1. Have your passport, flight details, and baggage information ready. Step 2. Log on to visitjamaica.com. Step 3. Enter your email address. A one-time password will be sent to your email to authenticate your account. Step 4. Fill in your personal information. Step 5. Complete the health questionnaire and upload your negative COVID-19 test results if applicable. Step 6. Provide intended place of stay information. Step 7. Provide consent and declaration. Step 8. Complete the immigration and customs form, then submit your application. And step 9. Wait for your application to be reviewed. If you're not coming from a high-risk area, you will receive a same-day communication. If successful, you will receive an email with your travel authorization. However, if you're coming from a high-risk location, you will receive a response within 2 days. If your health risk assessment level is above the threshold, you will receive an email recommending that you do not travel to Jamaica at this time. The travel authorization is valid for 7 days, except for travelers from high-risk areas. For persons traveling from high-risk areas, the travel authorization is valid for 11 days. You too should keep a printed or electronic copy of your travel authorization, along with your ticket and passport, in order to check in and board your flight. Please note that you will not be able to board your flight without your travel authorization. Now, here are the protocols for non-resident tourism visitors staying within the resilient corridors on arrival in Jamaica. Expect to do a health screening and risk assessment as previously mentioned. So, will you need a COVID test at the airport? Well, based on the health screening and risk assessment on arrival, persons may still be required to be tested at the airport or a designated facility if, for example, they are exhibiting certain symptoms or belong to a high-risk group despite presenting a negative COVID-19 test result. In this case, persons would await their test result in their hotel room. For persons who do not require testing or whose test result is negative, they would remain at their hotel or resort within the resilient corridors and restricted to the property for the duration of their stay. Persons will be allowed to leave the property in approved transportation to visit COVID-approved attractions such as Dolphin Cove, Duns River Falls, and so on. However, if the test is positive, they would be isolated either at the hotel or resort or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. Now, on to Category 3, non-resident business travelers. This category refers to non-business travelers who are visiting Jamaica for business purposes. Note that business purposes do not include funerals, weddings, other family gatherings, or other personal activities. Here are the protocols for non-business travelers before arrival. Number 1. Obtain a negative COVID-19 pretest if applicable. All residents of the United States, Brazil, Dominican Republic, and Mexico traveling to Jamaica for business purposes are required to upload a negative COVID-19 PCR test in order to obtain a travel authorization. Simply follow the previously discussed guidelines for getting a negative COVID-19 test for non-residents. Please note that as a business traveler, if you're not traveling from a designated high-risk area, you will not be required to upload a negative COVID-19 PCR test. Number 2. Complete and submit the travel authorization. Again, please follow the previously mentioned guidelines for completing the travel authorization for non-residents. Now, what are the protocols for business travelers on arrival in Jamaica? Expect to do a health screening and risk assessment as mentioned previously. So, will you need to do a COVID test at the airport?
Yes.
All business travelers should expect to be tested for COVID-19 on arrival at the airport in Jamaica. Persons will await their test results at their hotel or intended address. Business travelers who are staying in Jamaica for less than 14 days are required to remain at their intended address for up to 48 hours, whether a hotel or private home, until they receive a negative COVID-19 test result. If the test result is negative, persons would be released from quarantine and be placed under certain rules for a period of 14 days from their date of entry to Jamaica, or for the duration of their stay if shorter than 14 days. Here are the quarantine rules for business travelers. If the duration of their stay is shorter than 14 days, they will be allowed to leave only once per day to obtain food and medical supplies and to conduct their business meetings and financial transactions, following which they must return immediately. Next, business persons are required to observe all COVID safety protocols within Jamaica, such as wearing a mask in public places and complying with the physical distancing rules. Also, business travelers are not allowed to attend any meeting, event, or gathering of more than 20 persons, meet with persons aged 65 and over, or take any form of transportation with any other passenger other than a person with whom they have traveled to Jamaica. However, if the test result is positive, persons would be isolated either at their hotel or intended address or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. Here's an important note. Business travelers who are staying in Jamaica for 14 days or more will be required to complete their 14-day quarantine from their date of entry into Jamaica, even if their test result is negative. And now, let's look at category number 4. Non-resident tourism visitors not staying in the resilient corridors. This category refers to non-residents who are visiting Jamaica for tourism purposes and not staying within the resilient corridors as previously described. Here are the protocols before arrival. Number 1. Obtain a negative COVID-19 pretest if applicable. Again, simply follow the previously discussed guidelines for getting a negative COVID test for non-residents. Also, please be reminded that if you're not traveling from a designated high-risk area, you will not be required to upload a negative COVID-19 PCR test. And number 2, complete and submit the travel authorization. Please follow the previously mentioned guidelines for completing the travel authorization for non-residents. Next, here are the protocols on arrival in Jamaica. Expect to do a health screening and risk assessment as mentioned previously. And you may also be wondering, will you need a COVID test at the airport? Again, if assessed as high risk on arrival, persons will be required to do a COVID-19 test. Persons will then await their test results under quarantine at their intended address. Whether or not persons are required to be tested, or if tested and the test is negative, persons will be required to remain in quarantine at home for 14 days or for the duration of their stay from their date of entry into Jamaica. However, if the test result is positive, they will be isolated either at home or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. Now, here are some other important Jamaica travel information that all travelers to Jamaica should know. Since August 2020, there has been major spikes in COVID-19 cases in Jamaica. This creates a level of concern for persons traveling to the island. Therefore, if you decide to travel to Jamaica during this time, you should ensure that you practice proper COVID-19 hygiene and adhere to the COVID-19 protocols that have been set by the Jamaican authorities. These protocols include staying within the resilient corridor, the usual washing and sanitizing of hands, wearing face masks in public, social distancing, observing gathering restrictions, and obeying curfew hours. Also, please note that persons placed in quarantine should ensure that they obey the quarantine orders. Recently, the Jamaican authorities have reported that several persons have been violating the self-quarantine rules, and this has potentially been contributing to the spread of COVID-19 in Jamaica. Consequently, there will be tougher enforcement of quarantine rules. So, if you're assessed at the airport and subsequently you are placed under quarantine orders, we encourage you to follow the rules. Please consider that persons investigated and found to be in breach of the quarantine orders can be fined up to $1 million Jamaican dollars or the equivalent, or face 6 months in prison. So, there you have it. If you decide to visit Jamaica, stay safe and have fun. Hopefully from this video, you will have a clear understanding of Jamaica COVID-19 travel protocols, and ultimately, you will be able to make better travel plans. Thanks for watching. If you find this new update helpful, like the video and let us know in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more important travel updates. And remember, Jamaica or other destinations could make travel changes or close their borders at any time. Please accept full responsibility to seek up-to-date information about all possible risks before making any bookings or other arrangements. See you in our next video.